Alright, so we're going to pick up this project where Joe left it. So you can see that we still have an edit event controller and an event controller and the pages that he created for those controllers. And if I refresh our browser here, you can see that we have those pages still functioning here. Let's take a look at the event controller. You can see in here that we have all this event data in here. And actually, before we get into that, take a look at this scope parameter that's being passed into the event controller. That actually is an Angular service. And you can see that we're able to use it here in our controller just by injecting it in, or by specifying it as a parameter on the event controller. That's how the dependency injection stuff works with Angular. You just specify the services that you want in the parameters of the controller, and it will inject those in. And so let's take this data out of the controller and move it into a service. Eventually this data will be retrieved from an AJAX request, but for now let's just move it out of here into a service so we can see how we create services. So we'll start by creating a directory for our services. And in that directory, let's create a new JavaScript file for the event data service. And here we will create a service called event data. Now, notice that I did not use a $sign here, whereas the Angular services use a $sign. That is a naming convention for built-in Angular services, and you should not use the $sign on your own services, because if you do, you may end up creating a service that overwrites one of the built-in Angular services. So just create your services without the $sign. And you can see here that I'm creating an event data service, and I'm doing that by calling the factory method on the events app module. You'll remember Joe created this module previously, and it's called the events app module, and that's a variable that's available on the Windows scope. So I have access to that here in the services, or in the service that I'm trying to create, where I call events app.factory. And what you pass into the factory method is the name of the service and then a function that returns the object that will become that service. So the name of my service is event data. Let's come over here and grab this data out of here. And we'll just leave that with an error for now. And my event data service is going to have an event property on it. And that event property is going to now have the event data. This is not a very interesting service. Most often services will have methods on them, where right now I'm just using this for storing the event data. Now if I come over here into my controller, I can just inject event data, and then down here I can set my scope event equal to event data.event. If I run that now, you'll see I'll get an error. So I'm not getting any data, and if we look at our console, you can see that it's saying that there's an unknown provider for the event data provider. The reason why that is that although I created this service, I haven't included it yet in our page. So if we go to the event details page, and I register it here, services event data. Now if I refresh this page, there we go, we have our data back. And so it is now calling the controller to get the scope event, and then the controller is getting that data off of the event data service. And again, if we go over to our event data service, you remember we just created it by calling the factory method on the events app. And that's really all there is to creating a service. Remember earlier I said that an Angular service isn't really any different than any other service or object. The only difference is that it's registered with Angular. And the way we registered it with Angular is this events app factory call. And that's really all there is to creating services.